The first time I saw him, I thought it was just a tree. You know how dusk messes with the eyes, how the shadows stretch and smear, how the brain fills in shapes it's not sure about. But as the last light drained out of the sky, I noticed it wasn't a tree at all. There was a man standing against the horizon, still, silent, just a cutout of black against darker black. That was the first night at camp. We were 4 of us, me, Jordan, Emily, and Mark, college friends who thought we were too old for summer cabins, but too young for mortgages, so we compromised tents, a weekend in the national forest, no phones, no service, just firelight and bad beer, and him. We're not alone out here, I said, trying to make it come off as a joke. It didn't. Everyone turned toward the ridge, about 200 yards away, where the figure stood frozen, in a kind of weird dignity. His outline was sharp, shoulders square, head forward. What unsettled me most was the stillness. No swaying, no shifting weight, no scratch to a nose or arm, just rooted there. Hunter, maybe, Mark said half-heartedly, though his voice lacked conviction. Hunters wear orange, Emily whispered. Unless they're hunting something else, Jordan muttered. He laughed after, but it sounded too quick, covering something. We stared longer than we should have, until the fire popped and startled us back to living. When I finally got the courage to glance back up again, the ridge was empty. He was gone. We didn't talk about it. Instead, we opened another beer, pretended it hadn't happened, even though I knew we were all seeing him in our minds. The man-shaped hole cut into the fading light. Morning dissolved the fear. Sunlight makes you brave, makes the night feel like it was just bad dreaming. We hiked, swam a little in the lake, ate too much trail mix, but as the day slid toward evening, I caught myself scanning the ridge again. That sinking weight in my stomach dropped hard when Emily froze mid-sentence at dinner and pointed. He was back, same ridge, same rigid posture, but closer, much closer than before. Maybe only a football field's length this time. His head wasn't straight either. It was cocked slightly to the side, like a dog tuning into a whistle only it can hear. Or worse, like he was listening to us. Jordan swore under his breath. Man, that's not right. No one wanted to speak much after that. We all heard the unspoken worry rattling around. If he notices us noticing, will he come closer? So we said nothing, ate in silence, hardly looking up. The fire hissed down to embers. The dark wrapped around us, heavier than before. I laid there in my sleeping bag, hearing every creak of the trees, every ragged breath from my friends' tents. My brain kept circling back to that tilted head. How long had he been standing there like that? Was he still up there now, just outside the firelight, listening? Eventually I slipped under, though it wasn't sleep so much as a thin veil over wakefulness, and somewhere in that stretch of half-dream, I heard crunching, soft footsteps between pine needles, close, moving around the camp perimeter. I didn't check, didn't dare. By morning there was no sign of footprints, no broken twigs, nothing. But we all looked like hell. Barely any of us had slept. Coffee couldn't bleach out the shadows under Jordan's eyes, or the tight pale line of Emily's mouth. No one mentioned the ridge. No one mentioned footsteps. But the silence itself was its own admission. We didn't want to draw him in. Something about naming him aloud felt like permission, like calling down lightning. So we made a quiet little agreement without words. No one talks about it. We pretend. We endure. Of course, come dusk, he was there again. This time he'd have the distance. The ridge was gone behind him. He stood in the shallow slope just across the clearing, closer now than anyone could stomach. And it wasn't just the tilt of his head. His whole body was angled in a faint, unnatural lean, as though his spine didn't quite obey human mechanics. I couldn't help myself. I whispered, "Why isn't he moving?" Jordan snapped his head toward me. glaring, terrified. Don't talk about it. No one spoke the rest of the evening. Just silence. The oppressive calm that swelled until my ears rang. Every time the fire crackled, I flinched, certain the next sound would be his footsteps, breaking into the circle of light. Sometime past midnight, Emily screamed, a short, sharp cry that cut off too quickly. We scrambled out of our tents, flashlights jittering. She was standing at the tree lawn, pointing at the open clearing. It was empty. No, he was... Her words broke apart. He was here, between the tents. She held her hands barely a foot apart, voice trembling. That close. Jordan pulled her back, muttering, "Stop, don't say it, stop." But the damage was done, because when the beam of my flashlight finally skittered back across the clearing, it caught him, standing at the edge of the trees, no more than 10 feet away, close enough that his face should have been visible, but it wasn't. It was still shadow, as if the night had hollowed his features out. And then I realized he was leaning, yes, but not toward us, against something. Someone. Mark, who was still in his tent, hadn't joined us outside. Mark, whose voice we would never hear again. The figure was bent near his tent flap, the canvas trembling lightly against invisible breath. We didn't move, didn't dare. Then the tent slowly unzipped from inside. Mark crawled out on all fours, face slack, eyes distant. He stood beside the dark figure, as though waiting to be told what to do. When he spoke, his voice wasn't right, too slow, too measured. "You shouldn't speak." The man on the ridge, the watcher, that's what he was, turned with Mark at his side, and together they walked back into the trees, not breaking branches, not crunching leaves, just sliding into the dark like smoke. We never saw Mark again. When morning came, there was only his empty tent, his pack still inside, and we knew, all of us knew, that he hadn't left anything behind. Not really. We ran. No breakfast, no coffee, packed nothing, just left the camp in tatters, and hiked until the sun was unforgiving overhead, and our lungs burned. Even now, years later, I can't drive past tree lines at dusk without checking the ridges. Sometimes when the light is low and my thoughts wander too loud, I swear I see him there again, closer, always closer, and I don't talk about it, because if I do, you'll see him too. I woke up groggy, chilled from a night of fitful half-sleep, reached for my shoes outside the tent, and saw it right there in the clearing. Thick tree branches stripped smooth, arranged in a perfect ring, 20 feet across, centered neatly around our fire pit. And here's the thing, none of us heard a damn thing in the night. No snapping twigs, no footsteps. Whoever or whatever made that circle had crept into our camp without disturbing a fly. That was when I started wishing we hadn't picked that spot in the woods. "Okay, who did this?" Jordan asked, laughing too hard, hands planted on his hips, like he was calling us out on some prank. It wasn't me. It wasn't Emily or Mark. Emily's face had gone pale in the morning light. Those aren't just random branches. They're placed, like carefully. She was right. The circle was almost symmetrical, the ends jagged but aligned tip to base, like spokes on an old wagon wheel. Mark muttered, "Maybe it's, like a ranger thing, or some forest sign we don't get." But no one believed that. Camp rangers don't creep into camps in the dead of night, arranging branches like witches, and none of us wanted to admit the darker possibility. Someone had been here, watching us, close enough to reach into the spaces between our tents, without a sound. The second morning it was worse. This time the fire pit wasn't the focus. The branches were lined up into one long arrow, pointing directly into the woods behind our camp. Okay, that's Jordan's laugh cracked and died. He rubbed his face hard, eyes darting into the shadows where the arrow aimed. "Do not follow it," Emily said sharply. Her voice had an edge, panic and authority mixing like oil and water. "Maybe someone's lost," Mark offered weakly. "Maybe it's like a signal, like help this way, you know?" But none of us moved to follow it, 'cause deep down we could feel it. This wasn't a request, it was an invitation. And invitations out here, they don't end well. That night, I zipped my tent flap tight and pulled my sleeping bag over my head like a kid hiding from monsters. And for the first time in years, I prayed. Third morning spiral, a wide, dizzying swirl of branches, curling tighter until the final coil reached the base of Emily's tent. She didn't say anything when she saw it, just stood there barefoot in the cold dirt, staring down. The sight of her breathing fast, face strained, made something real click inside me. This wasn't a random spook camp story anymore. We were trapped inside a pattern. Jordan kicked at the branches, swore loudly, tried to scatter the spiral, to break whatever spell it hinted at. Watching him, I actually felt relief for a second, until I realized the branches didn't scatter easily. They were heavy, heavier than they should have been. Some of them seemed half buried in the earth, as though the ground itself was gripping them. That crushed the bravado out of all of us. "That's it," Emily whispered. "We're leaving tomorrow. We pack at first light." But of course, the woods had one morning left in store. I barely slept that night. Every rustle outside the tent felt personal, as though it leaned closer to me than anyone else. And at some hour between midnight and dawn, I swear I heard breathing, low, slow, steady, just on the other side of the nylon wall. The fourth morning finally bled into gray light. My throat was dry with dread before I even unzipped the tent flap. And there it was. Not circles, not arrows, not spirals. Letters, big blocky letters, spelled neatly across the clearing, crooked but unmistakable, stretching from tent line to fire pit. My name. The branches had spelled out my name. "Jesus," Jordan whispered when he saw it. No, that's a joke, right?" I couldn't speak. My name might as well have been carved into my skin right there. Emily grabbed my arm hard enough that her nails dug in. "We're leaving, right now." But Mark didn't move. He was just staring at the letters, lips parted. "They picked him," he said softly. "Not us, him." "What the hell does that mean?" I snapped, my voice breaking. He turned then, slowly, eyes too wide. "It means maybe if we give them what they want, the rest of us walk away." That was the first moment I really felt terrified of my friends. Maybe the branches weren't only changing the woods. Maybe they were changing us. We split. Emily dragged me toward my tent, hissed we'd pack fast and run. Jordan stood watch with shaking hands, holding the flimsy hatchet like it was worth a damn against whatever spelled names in wood. Mark refused to move. He just stood by the fire pit, staring at my name spelled on the ground, as though memorizing it, or maybe bartering with it. We left him there, head down, packs half filled, boots stumbling. We tore out of the clearing into the woods, ignoring the arrow we'd seen before, ignoring trails, just crashing branches, lungs burning, hearts flipping on panic switch. Every second I expected to hear pursuit. Every second I imagined branches falling behind us, rearranging in real time, chasing my name through the forest. But nothing followed. Nothing except silence, heavy as dawn mist. We made it to the ranger station by mid-afternoon, looking like escapees from someone else's nightmare. Told the ranger we'd gotten turned around. Left out the rest. How do you explain to anyone that the woods spelled your name with its own bones? Emily doesn't talk about it now. Jordan moved across the country. And Mark, he was never reported missing. As far as anyone knows, he made it home safe. But I know better, because sometimes at dawn, half asleep in my own quiet apartment, Far from those woods, I'll glance to the corner of my bedroom and swear I see branches, arranged neatly, curling slowly into the letters of my name. That's the first thing you need to understand about that night. We all thought mirrors told the truth and that the water on the lake was just another mirror. But what we saw out there in the ripples wasn't us. It was something waiting, crouched on the edge of our circle, too patient to be human. And once we saw it, there was no putting it back. There were 4 of us that weekend, laid out around a campfire on the pebbly bank of Crescent Lake, middle of nowhere. Trees dense as a wall behind us, black water ahead, a thin half moon over it all. I was the one holding the lantern, one of those old metal ones with the glass globe, humming warm and yellow. I shifted it toward the water without thinking, just admiring the glow across the lake, and that's when I saw the reflection wasn't right. 4 shapes, me, Jordan, Emily, and Claire, clear as day, all seated around the campfire in the glassy shimmer. And then the 5th shape, crouched low just outside our circle, hands dangling too long, knees bent as though it had been waiting there forever. At first I thought it had to be a trick of the ripples, the wobbling lantern flame. But no, the fire's reflection burned steady. Our faces wavered but still recognizable. And the crouched figure? It wasn't wavering at all. It was sharper than the rest of us. Jesus Christ, I breathed, nearly dropping the lantern. What? Jordan asked. He leaned toward me, beer in hand, smile half gone. I didn't answer. I just pointed at the water. They all turned, followed my hand, squinted at the lake. Emily gasped. Claire made a noise like a whimper caught in her throat. Jordan set his drink down real slow. Tell me that's us, Emily whispered. It's not us, I said. My voice sounded thin, like it was getting pulled away. Count 1, 2, 3, 4. We all hesitated. None of us wanted to say the 5th number. Panic makes you stupid. Claire lunged forward and blew out the lantern, as though taking away the light would erase what we'd seen in the reflection. The darkness was instant, like drowning. Firelight gave us only a dull orange glow, not enough to see more than a foot past each other's faces. Beyond that, absolute void. The forest behind us, the lake spreading black in front, and then we heard it, not from behind, where you'd expect footsteps, from the water. First a faint splash right off the shoreline, like someone eased a foot into the shallows, then another, and then more, 2, 3, 4 sets, all too close together, all moving toward us. Get the fire bigger, Jordan hissed. No, don't draw it closer. Emily's voice was pitched high enough to break. What the hell do you mean it? I snapped. My heart was somewhere up under my tongue. No one answered, because part of us, all of us, already knew what she meant. We sat frozen, each splash of water dragging closer, impossibly slow and deliberate. It wasn't someone charging. It was worse, as though whoever was out there wanted us to know they weren't rushing. They had time. I gripped the hatchet I'd brought for chopping firewood. It felt small, like holding a toy against some enormous weight pressing just out of sight. Jordan dared a look into the black water, leaning low, his eyes squinting like he could peel answers out of the shadows. Then he stiffened, his hands balled into fists. What do you see? I whispered. He didn't answer, just kept staring at the lake with his jaw clenched, face blanching pale. When I grabbed his arm, he flinched hard, like I'd ripped him out of something. It's us, he said, voice trembling. Don't, Claire begged. Don't say it. You ever had a nightmare where something bends reality in a way your brain can't catch? Where you know what you're seeing is wrong, but the wrongness is so sharp it slices right past disbelief? That's what the lake was like when I looked back into it. The reflections were still there, but now there weren't 5. There were 8. All of us doubled, tripled shadow clones in the water, as though the lake was creating a version of us that had been crouching closer all along. Some of the copies didn't move when we did. Some were too slow, and the one shaped like me was smiling. I wasn't. Emily lost it. She snatched up a burning stick from the fire like a torch and hurled it into the shallows. Phlegm hissed and sputtered, spitting steam. The splashing stopped. For a moment, silence stretched across the clearing, a taut wire vibrating in every rib. Even the night insects had gone still. And then, movement. Rapid. Rushing. A whole storm of footsteps, slamming water, as though every duplicate had lunged at once. "Run!" Jordan bellowed. We bolted for the tree line, crashing through underbrush, branches clawing our faces, roots tripping our every stride. Behind us, the waterline chaos, splashing and snapping twigs, like we'd woken up something meant to stay sleeping. Emily shouted my name too loud. The woods swallowed her voice, tossed it back warped. Claire's sobs blurred into the racket like she was already being dragged under. Jordan kept yelling to keep together, but the dark made everything scatter, pulling us apart like torn fabric. Something reached for me. I swear I felt it graze my back. A wet hand, fingers cold as lake water, closing but not catching. I didn't look back. Eventually we collapsed in the brush. My lungs were knives. Emily doubled over, gagging. Claire sobbed. Jordan just fell silent. When I forced myself to glance behind, there was nothing. No footsteps. No splashing. Only black woods. We stumbled until dawn scraped pale light over the horizon. That's when we found the clearing again. The fire burned down to ash. The lantern tipped gray on its side. And by the lake's edge, 4 sleeping bags laid neatly in a row. Ours. But each one was occupied. 4 bodies. All of us. Lying there dead asleep, breathing slow. And one of them smiled when the sunlight touched its face. I don't tell this story often, because people always ask the same thing. Well, if you saw yourselves asleep by the lake, then who's telling it now? And the truth is, I ask myself that too. Because sometimes, when I pass by a dark window or glance into still water, I see the smile again. Not on them, on me. And I don't know which side I'm supposed to be on anymore.